Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have a very special presentation on Luminar Flex, which is a plugin that works in a variety of host applications. We've got Abba Shapiro here. He's a pro photographer. He also is the co-director of the education team here at Skylum and an excellent instructor. So sit back and relax and enjoy this particular webinar. We're glad that you could join us. And thank you for presenting, Abba.
Well, thank you, Lori. Well, today I'm going to walk you through Luminar Flex. Now, what's really cool about Luminar Flex is you can really create beautiful images directly from a variety of host applications. Everything from Adobe Photoshop CC, Adobe Lightroom Classic, Adobe Photoshop Elements on both Mac and Windows, as well as Apple Photos on the Mac, or Photos on the Mac. Now, the cool thing is, in addition, Photoshop users have the benefit of using Luminar as a plugin as a smart object. So you can revise your edits even after you close the plugin and close Photoshop and then reopen it. So that's really cool. And you can even in Photoshop record custom actions. So you can leverage Luminar filters and layers and textures really quickly by creating these actions. And I'm going to walk you through that. If you want to try it, just go ahead and you can download Luminar Flex from our Skylum website. And once you install it, it'll be accessible inside your host applications. And we do have some videos online that show you how to install it if you need help. And with that, let me hop into Photoshop and start showing you exactly how you can leverage Luminar Flex with your host applications. So I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. So I'll have a couple of images. As a matter of fact, let me open an image directly from my operating system, and we'll process that image. I have a camera raw file that I might bring in. Let me go ahead and find one here. There's one that I liked. Yeah, I liked working with this one. So this is just a raw image, and I'm going to open that in Photoshop. I'll go ahead and just drop it right onto the Photoshop icon and pop it open. And I like this image, and I could go ahead and I could use the raw develop because this is a raw file when I bring it into Photoshop. So the idea here is you can use all the power of Photoshop that you're used to, but also use all the power of Luminar Flex, as well as if you have other plugins. So the nice thing is it works really nicely in concert with a workflow that you might already have. And I noticed from everybody who had answered the question that we do have a high percentage of people that use Photoshop and Lightroom, and this is a great tool. It's designed specifically to work as a plugin, so it's robust and easy to use and easy to leverage. So I'm going to just leave this process the way it is. I'm not going to do any of the raw processing here, just to show you how you can leverage Luminar, and I'm simply going to hit Open Image. So now I have the image available to me in Photoshop. And if I wanted to, I could go ahead and crop this image to the way that I like it. So I want to actually crop this to a square image. So I'm going to go ahead and click on cropping, and we'll go with square. And I like the fact that if I crop this, if I click there, I'm going to go ahead and fix this. Once again, I think that's a little bit tight of a crop, so let me undo that. I kind of clicked wrong here. So we want to do this as a square, and I'll just draw the square around where I like this. And I think that's really kind of a nice framing there. I want to work on that image. So I could go ahead and I can crop this. We have the image cropped. If I wanted to, I could straighten this a little bit. Again, I'll just simply click on straighten, and I'll just draw here a nice little line. So I've leveraged that, and now I'm ready to start processing my image. So if I wanted to, I could click right now on this layer and go into Filter, and then under Skylum Software, choose Luminar Flex. And if I choose this workflow, it would go ahead, bring me into Luminar Flex. I could edit it, bring it back, but the edits would be locked in. So it's all depending on the style that you want to edit. So let me just go ahead and I'll do it this way, and then I'm going to make it into a smart object and show you the difference. So I'm going to click on Luminar Flex. It will launch the plugin, and it will bring this into the plugin. Let me go ahead and hide that again. And so I have this, it's straightened, it's showing me the image without the crop so I can see everything. So that's kind of nice. And when I go back, it will be fully cropped again. And I could simply open up one of my workspaces, and I know a lot of people who are watching already use our other Skylum products, such as Luminar 3 or Luminar 2018. So you might be aware that we do have a variety of workspaces. They're slightly different in Luminar Flex. The image aware is probably one of the ones that I enjoy the most because it allows me to use our AI tools as well as our image aware tools. And I'm going to just slide the accent AI filter to make this pop a little bit. There's no real sky to speak of. And as a matter of fact, Luminar Flex is smart enough to know there's no sky. And as you can see, it's grayed out. I'm going to warm it up a little bit. It wasn't really golden hour, and I don't really want to get that feel, but I have all these options available to me very quickly, and I could maybe add a little bit of vibrance. I like it to pop, and just a little structure. And I think the brilliance and warmth is good. Add a little bit of advanced contrast to my highlight. That's going to actually recover some of my highlights. I like the way this looks. I'm going to add one more filter that I really like, and I'll go down here. And that filter is the tone filter. And it allows me to do something called smart toning. And I can go ahead and bring up my shadows a little bit without affecting my highlights. And this makes the skirt pop. And this is really nice. So once I've done this general editing and I've really leveraged the power and speed of Luminar, I simply go ahead and I click on apply. And now the image will go back into Photoshop. And you'll see in just a moment, there it is in Photoshop. It is applying all the filters. My crop is there, it's still straightened. So very quickly, I was able to take an image that was not quite as bright and exciting as I originally saw it. And now I can fix it very easily. If I wanted to, I can show you what the original looks like. There was the original that I brought in. There it is with the crop and the straightening, but in and out of Luminar is it was very easy for me to be able to quickly process this image. Now you can see when I go down here, let me hit escape, I turned on my crop again, everything is fixed in this layer and I can't adjust it. But if I wanted to, I could go back, and I'm going to go back to the very moment that I open this document. And instead of leaving this as a general background, I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to convert this to a smart object. And what a smart object allows me to do is it allows me to make the changes. And if I wanted to go back and make additional changes, this is all live. As a matter of fact, if you look closely here, you see that the icon has changed. I'm going to zoom in here. Hopefully it will be zoomed in on the monitors that you're watching. It's hard for me to tell, but you can see that it looks a little bit different here as a smart object. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send this to Luminar Flex. I have the layer selected, go into Filter, Skylum Software, and then we'll go ahead and we'll bring it into Luminar Flex. Now, I didn't crop it this time, just for the sake of speed, but I want to show you how dynamic this is. Again, I can add a workspace that I want. We'll go to Image Aware. We'll do it very quickly this time. A little bit of Accent AI, a hair of golden hour. I don't really have any foliage in here. We'll just add a little bit of vibrance to make it pop, and a little structure. And I like this. We'll even add a little more vividness to the color. Looking at it, it might be a little saturated. So let me go down and pull down the saturation. And one of the nice things, by the way, and I comment on this because it is my favorite filter, is with vibrance, is its smart saturation. So I moved that to the right, and it really did pop all the colors. But it evened them out a little bit by lowering the saturation and increasing the vibrance. And then the other filter that I added was my tone filter, just to open up the shadows on the skirt. And I'm really liking that. I will click apply. It will take me back into Photoshop, and we'll apply all these filters. Obviously, we didn't do any cropping here. So I'm looking at this image and I really like it. And then I might go back and I can say, you know what? I think I want to do a little bit more work. I want to try stylizing this. And this is great because all I have to do is double click on the Luminar Flex filter within the lower right side of my screen, and it will now relaunch Luminar Flex. And I can even do this after I've saved and closed the document. So there's all my adjustments. And I could say, you know, I think the yellow or the orange is a little bit too much. I'm going to add one of the more advanced filters. I'm going to add the HSL filter. And the nice thing about this filter is I can target specific colors. So I can go over here to the orange and maybe desaturate that just a little bit, so she pops, and maybe even go into the hue. And let's take a look at what I can do with that orange here. Maybe I'll make it a little more yellow. So I like that. I've made a few changes, and maybe I want to see how it looks stylized. So I'm going to go ahead and click the little plus button in the upper right-hand corner by layers and create a new layer, and I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. And this allows me to try some of the looks that are bundled with Luminar Flex. And as you can see, if I click over here by Luminar Looks, we have a variety of look collections that you can try. If you are familiar with Luminar 3 or Luminar 2018, you'll notice that our look collection is slightly different. We've tweaked them for Luminar Flex. So let's go over to Creative and see what our options are. And I can see, a preview of what these will look like. Let me try here and see what Street Life does to my image. And it's a different vibe. It's a different feel. I think it's a little more muted than my style wants. I'll try super dramatic. And this will apply a series of filters. And once again, when you apply any of these looks, and we'll go back to orange and teal, that's very popular. We'll see how that makes the image look. I can dial back the amount of that look, or if I like where a look is taking me. So perhaps I like this super dramatic. So we'll go back here, but I don't like the way part of the image is working. Maybe I don't like the way the LUT mapping is working, and I can turn that off, and I can still now have the image pop. So I've modified this, and I simply click apply, and it will take me back into my Photoshop document. And inside the Photoshop document, all these changes have been updated. And I can go back and forth between Photoshop and Luminar Flex as often as I want. In addition, as I said, if I save this document and opened it up later, I can still step into Luminar Flex and make modifications. Now that I have the image looking the way I wanted it to, and you can see here, this was my before, this was my after. It's subtle, but it makes a big difference. I can go ahead and leverage all the other tools that I might want to use in Photoshop. So if I like to use the ability, as a matter of fact, perhaps I wanted to select just her, I could use my selection tool, select her, and focus just on that, perhaps making a copy of the layer. So it's very, very powerful. And I really like this feature and the way Luminar Flex works as a plugin inside of Photoshop. That ability to turn it into a smart object is incredibly powerful and incredibly flexible. Now, another great feature of Luminar Flex within the context of Adobe Photoshop is the ability to create actions so you can very quickly leverage the power of Luminar Flex with the power of Photoshop and the power of Photoshop actions. Now, I built an action already. I'll show you how to do it in a moment, but I want you to see the end result. So here what I've done is I've created an action where I'm going to create a nice crunchy stylized image from this photo, and I'm going to add my watermark. And you can see here that if I click on this action, and this is just an image that I opened up, it'll work on a JPEG, a TIFF, a RAW, whatever you want, is it will convert it to a small object. It takes it into Luminar Flex. It will apply a variety of filters that I've already preset in Luminar Flex. It'll then bring it back out. It's going to place my watermark, and we're good to go. So you can see I have this image with a simple click of activating this action or playing this action. It starts the plugin, brings it into Luminar Flex. It will apply all of the filters that I preset, all of the settings that I created. Once it's done that, it automatically hits apply, sends it back to Photoshop, and places in my watermark, and we're ready to go. And this is a really great way of working because it really speeds up your workflow. You can have consistency of a look, leveraging all the power of Photoshop with the power of Luminar Flex. Now, let me show you how I would create that. I'm going to step back and we will undo this. So let's just go back to our history. We'll go to the point where I've just opened it. And if I wanted to create an action, I would go over to the Actions menu. I would hit, and it's been a while since I've done this, actually about a week. So I could say begin recording. okay, to create a new one. Actually, I want to create a new action. So let me go ahead and stop that recording. We'll go stop there. We want to create a new action. So there we go. We'll create a new action there. We'll call this Flex Test. And I'm going to put this into my Luminar Action section. I'll hit record. And now what I can do is go through a series of steps that I would do to create this image. So the first thing is I want to make this a smart object. After I make it a smart object, I can go ahead and apply the filter, Skylum software, Luminar Flex. This will open up the plugin, and it is still recording all of my actions. We're inside of Luminar Flex. I will open up a workspace. Maybe we'll look at Intensify. And all this does is open up a variety of filters when I open up a workspace in a neutral position so I can start playing with them. I'm going to add a little bit of Accent AI to really make the image pop. I like the fact that we're dealing with a weightlifter, and the scary thing is a good friend of mine. This guy is in his 40s with adult children, so it gives me hope that I can once again get back into shape. So I'm going to go ahead, add a little bit of structure to make it nice and crisp, and a little bit of enhanced details. Make this pop, not too much because I don't want to make it too crunchy. And then I think we're good here. Maybe I'll pull the saturation down a little bit. I like that little bit of a washed out tone. And I think it's pretty good. I like the look here. I can see before and after very quickly. It's subtle, but it does what I want. It's great for a fitness image. And I'll click on apply. Now, all of this has been recorded using the action section. And we'll be back in Photoshop in just a moment. So I could, at this point, if I want, go ahead and find my logo, add the logo, and position it. But for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to go ahead and hit stop. And it has created this really cool thing where it converts to a smart object, and it does what I want with Luminar Flex. Now, let me jump over to my Finder and open up another image. Here's another image of the same guy. This happens to be a JPEG, so we'll work with that. And I'll drag that on, and I will also add that to Photoshop. And I'm ready to run this plugin. So I simply click on the Flex Test. I hit play. It will automatically turn this into a smart object. It will apply all of the filters with the sliders that I have preset. And I like that. And then it's going to bring me back into Photoshop. Now, I like what it's done, but I've noticed here that I am seeing a little bit more of the background. This was not really the most ideal environment. As a matter of fact, it was in the middle of a gym. So when I brighten this up, it works a little bit different on the image. And this is great because I can still, because I made this a smart object, with my action, simply click on Luminar Flex. It's going to step me back into the plugin. I can tweak this if I wanted to. I have this brightened up a little bit, so maybe it's a little bit too much of the Accent AI, or I could add a filter. I could add the develop filter, and this will put it at the very top. And I'll just bring my shadows down a little bit and bring my blacks down a little bit so that pops. And then I can, well, let me open up the shadows. So I can start hiding this. And if I wanted to, I can even leverage some of the more powerful tools within Luminar Flex, such as curves, and I could start bringing down just the shadowed areas. So I could take that and start working on that. So we'll play with that a little bit. But as you can see, I can make my changes still. And then when I'm done, simply hit apply, and it will take me back into Photoshop, and I can continue to work with this. For instance, if I wanted to use the dodging and burning, I could go ahead and remove some of that simply by clicking on my dodge tool, click and hold. You can see we have burn there. Make sure I have the right layer selected, and then go ahead and I would rasterize this, and I could burn this in and start painting in where I want it to be darker. And I'm using the right bracket to make this bigger, and I'm slowly painting this where I'm hiding some of that background. A lot of different ways to do that, but the bottom line is I have this flexibility of creating these actions, and I can go ahead and use them. So that's how I would use Luminar Flex within the context of Photoshop, leveraging everything that Flex has to offer and all of the workflows that I'm used to when working in Photoshop. Let's switch over to Lightroom. And I should have that library open. So here's a library of images in Lightroom. And I'll pick an image that I want to work with. There was one that, let's see what we can use. Here we have that similar image, but I'm going to work with something fresh. And I'll look at this image here. And if we look at this image, you can see this is a the name of this image and the type of image it is. And I just wanted to verify that I'm working with something that I like. Yeah, it's a nice raw Canon image. So I can select this image and I can bring it in one of two ways. If I right click on it, I can bring it in by saying edit in, and then I can have it edit in Luminar Flex. And much like we saw, I believe I just clicked the wrong one, so I'm going to do that one more time. Let me just open that up full. And that's a JPEG. I want to bring in, actually, I'm going to work with a JPEG this time. And I will edit this in Luminar Flex. Just like you saw before, it's going to send it there. I do have some options when I'm sending it from Lightroom. I can send it over to Luminar Flex as a copy with any adjustments I might have made in Lightroom. And this is really nice. I can use all the power of Lightroom and organizational function of Lightroom and still leverage Flex. I can choose to edit a copy of the original without my adjustments, or the original, of course. And when I send it over there, I can send it as a TIFF file and as a 16-bit TIFF file, which is nice because I will retain a lot of that nuance in that I have 16-bit of color depth versus 8, so I really won't get any banding. And I would simply hit edit. And this, again, will bring me into Luminar Flex as a plugin. I can play with some of my looks. I'm going to switch from the creative looks to my, let's go with professional and just see what some of our options are. And as I indicated earlier, you have this really nice feature at the bottom when you're looking at the thumbnails from the looks, is to see how that look is going to affect our image. And I want this to be black and white and be a little bit retro, especially because Audrey Hepburn's there. And so with a single click, I'm able to apply this. And all it did was bring in my black and white conversion. I'm going to change it a little bit here. I'm going to go over to the saturation and bring up the red just a little bit to stylize it. So I've been able to leverage a look that's already there, but I'm bringing it to a style that I like. I like the fact that it focuses on Audrey Hepburn, and I'm going to add another filter. I'm going to bring in my vignette so I can focus the eye of my viewer. We'll just bring that down a little bit here, bring the size down a little bit, throw in the inner light. Now this is dead center. I want to place the center over Audrey Hepburn. And sometimes what I like to do when I'm placing the center and working with a vignette is I actually make it pretty extreme. I bring the size down to be pretty small. I completely remove the feather so I can see precisely the shape of my vignette as well as the position. I want it to be a little rounder. I'm going to click on Place Center and place it over her. And now I'll bring it back to something that's less aggressive. I'll bring that feather back in, and I will keep my inner light. And what this is going to do is it's really going to focus our eyes on this part of the image. There it is with the vignette, and there it is without. Nice and subtle, and I like the way this image is working. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and make some other changes. I could mask and maybe bring down some of the red, but I like the way this feels. And now I'll hit apply. And what happens when I hit apply is Luminar Flex will send this back to Lightroom and create a second image, a TIFF image, and put that right next to the image we have. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the gallery key. The G key is the shortcut. And we'll find that where that image is. There is the original image to the right, and here is the processed image, and I can now leverage anything I would want to do in Lightroom. So that's really a great feature. I can, batch export, I can create a catalog for people to view, and I can even apply any kind of presets I want. So that's one way of working with an image, and that was a JPEG image. But there are times that you really want to maintain the full power and resolution of your raw image. So let me open up a raw image here, and I should have some a raw image. That's a JPEG. I can do a search. I'm trying to remember where I put my raw image. Well, we'll go with this image here. That's should be a raw. Let me find a raw image. I apologize. There's a couple of ones here. Did I bring in only JPEGs for this? So I can actually bring one in, but let me just make sure to see if I don't have a raw here. I should have had a raw. I apologize for that. There we go. There's a raw image. And so I like this image. I want to stylize it, but I don't want to send it over as a TIFF. I want to maintain the full set of goodness that is in my raw image, which is this extra dynamic range that you have from a camera raw file. I don't have anything compressed or applied to it. So I want to work with this in its native format. So what I need to do is, instead of right-clicking and saying edit in, what I want to do is go over to File, plug in extras, and I'm going to transfer this to Luminar Flex. And what happens is Lightroom will create a digital negative, a .dng file, which it will send over to Luminar. Now I'm working with this image as its original camera raw without any of that loss. And I know that when I add my develop filter, and it lets me add a raw develop filter. So now I can use the power of the raw developer within Luminar, and I really like it. I find I get about an extra stop dynamic range with that instead of using the camera raw that's built into Lightroom. So I can open up, say, my shadows a little bit and bring that up. I like the exposure. I like the rain. I'm going to bring a little bit of clarity in. My highlights, I'll bring that down. Let's take a look at if we add our accent AI filter and our AI sky enhancer filter to this, just to see how it works. And sometimes I just like playing with it to see if it improves the image or improves the way I intended the image to be. I think it opens it up a little bit too much. I like that kind of gray, rainy day. I can go with the sky enhancer, and it's going to bring in a little detail there. So this is nice. It's stylized my image. I can now go ahead and apply any of my creative looks to it that I might want. So I think the developing is good. And when I work with creative looks, I like to add a second adjustment layer because this gives me a little flexibility to play. And I can just try different things. I can look at intensify. I can look at soft glow. I like where some of this is going, but let's step over to some of our more creative looks that we have here. Or actually, let me look at analog. And this is going to stylize my image much like I did if I had shot this with different types of film and the way the film reads this image. So I can step through here and see what I like. And remember, once I find something that I like, and I kind of like this heavy stylized one, though I also like this image here. I like the feel of this. I think the gray with the light popping is really nice. So I'm going to leave this mostly the way that it is, but I'm going to tweak it up a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit of microstructure, and I want to see some more detail. So I'm going to add the detail enhancer and just crunch that up a little bit. I'm looking for something very crunchy in my image, very stylized. That's nice, maybe a little bit more than I want. I like where this is going. I can zoom into 100%. It's giving me a very stylized look. And this is working really well for me. And I think finally, I just want to increase my contrast a little bit so I can go down and grab my curves. And with the curves, just create a little bit of an S curve. And that's going to crunch down my blacks and open up my highlights. It's getting to where I want it to be. And I can even apply a crop if I wanted to, or do some cloning and erasing. I'm going to crop this. I want this to be great for my Facebook page. So I'm going to go right here and say, make this the aspect ratio of Facebook cover. Like the way that works. I think this is a little distracting here on the right. So we'll just tighten it up a little bit, maintain the aspect ratio. This is great. And I'm going to hit the Enter key to apply the crop. And now that I have it the way I like it, I'm going to send it back to Lightroom. So I simply hit Apply. It will now process this image, crop the image, and much like before, it's now going to create a second version of this image next to the first. I'm hitting the G key for gallery, and we can see here that we have our original, and we have the crop, the processed one, and I really like the way this looks for my image. So this is great. So as you can see, we can do that. There's the original. I actually had played with one earlier. That's why there's an additional cropping. You can see the cropping's a little bit different there. And I can now, again, use Lightroom to do whatever I would want with these images. So using Luminar Flex as a plugin for Lightroom is extremely powerful. Now, the last thing I'm going to show is how it works with photos on a Mac for those of you who work on Macintoshes. And this is great because it, again, enhances what you can do inside of photos without having to compromise. So we'll take this image here, and this is just directly out of the camera. It's a little blown out. I like this image. I want to take advantage of the AI features within Luminar Flex. So all I have to do with any image in photos is select it, switch over to the edit mode. Once I'm in the edit mode, I go to these three little dots, which is extensions, and I'm going to open this up in Luminar Flex. And just like before, it sends this file to Luminar Flex. We'll wait 1 second. And I want to just add my image-aware workspace. It's a great place to start. And I can customize these. And I will go ahead, add the accent AI filter. I'll do a little bit of sky enhancing, warm it up with some golden hour, no foliage here. I'm going to even out the colors by pulling down the saturation, opening up the vibrance. I can add a little bit of structure. I want some detail here. I think we're good with the other areas, though I do want to open this up a little bit. I'm going to add a filter. We've used it before. I like the tone filter. I like the smart toning of the tone filter because if I work with this slider by moving it to the right, I can open up my shadows without affecting the color or my highlights, and moving it to the left would recover highlights. So this will just open up and make that red dress pop a little bit. And I can use tools that are not available to me in photos, such as the HSL. So now I can work with that red dress, and I want to make sure that the red is really a bold red, and I want it to be a lot brighter. So I'll brighten up just the red, and I think this is good. And now I'm going to add a vignette. So we'll go over here to vignette. Like I did before, I will place the center over her. I'm not going to go through the whole process again of how I normally work with a vignette. You've already seen that. So I can bring down some of that. I want it to be very subtle. I think the image in general is a little bit bright. I opened it up too much. And the nice thing is, all of these filters concatenate. And as a matter of fact, this was a raw image that I sent from Apple Photos. So I still have all the power of raw developing, and I can bring down my highlights just to recover this image and maybe a little bit of exposure. Actually, I didn't want to do the highlights there. I wanted to go all the way to the top, bring down my highlights, bring my exposure down just a little bit so I can deal with that. And here's an example where I might use advanced contrast because I want to bring down just this really bright area, and I can work with that in my highlights. And you can see I'm starting to bring a little detail back into this ocean. And the last thing I'm going to do is bring in that detail enhancer and bring up my small details and my medium details just to make this nice and crisp. I like the way this is working. Technically, this is straight. It looks like it's a little bit crooked based upon the, I think the way the horizon's working. So we'll fix it for the eyes. We'll jump over here to crop, under crop. I like actually the default layout. Maybe I'll tighten it up just a little bit here for my rule of thirds. That's kind of nice. Bring it down a little bit over here. And we will go ahead, click on angle, and with angle open, I can straighten that just so that it looks a little bit straighter there. I'm happy with that. I can go ahead and hit enter, and that will apply this. Click on done. Now I have this fully cropped. I'm good to go. If I wanted to, I can even go ahead, and I have a little bit of camera dust here. It might even be a speck of water from the beach. So I can go over to my tools menu, simply select the erase or clone and stamp. With sky, I like to use clone and stamp because I can be very specific because sometimes it's tricky the way clouds work. It's going to prepare the image. It's going to apply all of those filters and create a stamped layer. And now I can choose the area that I want as my source. I'll zoom in by hitting Command or Control 1. Oops, I wanted to move that over. Let me undo that. I actually painted there. So it's easy for me to zoom into where I want. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And now with the opacity at 50%, I like doing this when I paint out areas. It lets me be a little bit more subtle in my blending and just paint out that spot. If I wanted to, I could also paint out this bird. And probably with that, I could have used 100%. So it fixes that problem. And I have, again, some issues here, but I'll go through it kind of quickly. Just all I'm doing is holding down the Alt key or the Option key and picking my source area and then painting that. And probably I would focus this a little bit on some lighter areas. So we'll undo that. But I would fix this with a little more care and detail if I was actually going to work with this. I like it. I hit done. And now I'm ready to send it back to Photos. So I'll click on Save Changes. It sends it back to Photos. You'll see that the image that was in Photos has now been replaced. So the way Photos work is Apple always keeps in its backup a copy of the original. So let this go ahead, bring this in. So now we're in Photos. This was the before. This was the after, and you can see I really have enhanced this, but if I needed to, I could always revert back to the original. It's non-destructive to the original one. As a matter of fact, even if I've hit done, and I go back to my gallery view and worked on some other images, I could go back here and say, you know what? I need to work on the original image, open it up, click on Edit, and I have the ability to revert back to the original. So in a nutshell, that's the way you would use Luminar Flex within these three applications. And as I indicated before, it also works with the Adobe Photoshop Elements. So if you're working with Elements, you can use that. And again, it works on both Windows and Mac. And that's really nice that with all of these, you can just jump back and forth with any of these. I'm going to, again, hit done and bring us back to my nice opening slide that I created. And I will now take it to Lori, who will show you where you can find some things, as well as start taking some questions.
Okay, you should be able to see my screen. We are at the Skylum website, and what I want to do is show you where you can find some more information about the Luminar Flex plugin. If you go to skylum.com, along the top of the screen, you'll see several different products of ours, including Luminar, and you'll see Luminar 3, as well as Luminar Flex plugin. So we're going to concentrate here on the right-hand side. So if you click on the plugin section here, it'll show you how you can download a trial if you haven't used it before, and also some of the new features, which include new looks and new workspaces. And then Abba had shown you the Adobe Photoshop Actions and Smart Objects as well. So you can check that out at your convenience. The other thing too that is nice to look at is the user guide, Luminar Flex user guide. And so what this does is it goes through all of the Luminar Flex filters to how to install it. Everything is in here that you need to know. So you can just click on if you want to know what a workspace is, you'll get a description, and some of these actually go through each and every slider. So if you have any questions, you can go here, and you can also go to our support group. They're happy to help you. If you want to send them an email, if you have any technical type issues, just email support@skylum.com, and they'll be happy to help you. Just a couple other things just for you to know. Under the education section, we do have an education section that includes our videos and tutorials and blog posts that you can take a look at, as well as we have a YouTube section as well. So if you go to our YouTube channel, we always upload our latest and greatest there as well. So you may want to check that out. Okay, at this time, I think we're ready to take a few questions. Is that okay, Abba?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Kevin was asking a question, and he was asking, do you recommend noise reduction on raw files before you send them over, or do you reduce within Luminar Flex?
That's a great question. I actually like using the noise reduction in Luminar Flex. And one of the reasons I like that, and let's go over to the one of the images that we brought over that was a raw image. I think actually this first one benefits from it, though it is a JPEG, is that I can very easily paint in the noise reduction. So we have a smart filter here, which is great. So I can keep changing it. I'll click onto Luminar Flex. It will now launch this into Luminar Flex. And let me work with this image. Lori, I think I'm hearing you typing in the background.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Yep. So what I'm going to now do is, I like this way it's developed. I could add my noise filter on this layer. As a matter of fact, I think I will. Sometimes I like to add it on a separate layer because then I can dial it back or turn it on and off. So actually, let me do that. Let me add this as its own new adjustment layer. And I'm going to add denoise. And I can control my noise in both the luminance as well as the color. And I like to bring things up to 100%. Now, I made this pretty crunchy intentionally, but let's pretend this is noise. I'm just scrolling in and out with my mouse. And I'm going to just crank that up a lot, even boost it. And you can see what it's doing before and after. It would be reducing the noise, but this is where I really like the power of Luminar Flex. I'm going to bring this back down to 100%, hitting Control-0 or Command-0 on my keyboard. And now I can paint in exactly where I want the denoise to work. And I can do that on the filter level by clicking on the little paintbrush on the filter, or I can do this on the layer level by clicking on the paintbrush on the layer. I'll do it on the layer. I'm going to click over here to brush. I now get a brush where I can paint in or paint out this filter. I can change the size of my brush with the left and right bracket filters. I'm sorry, the left and right bracket key, and I can start painting in where I want to remove that noise, which is likely to be in my darker area. But I can control where I'm painting in that denoise because I don't want to ruin the crunchiness on his skin. If I want to see exactly where I'm painting in when I'm using this masking filter, I simply click on Show Mask, this little eyeball here, it's the /, and I can see the Rubylith overlay and be very precise where I'm removing my noise. I'm going to switch from paint to erase because I cut a little bit of his arm here, and this is a nice soft filter, so it should work well when I apply it. I'm going to hit the X key that actually toggles me back from paint and erase. And now that I'm done, I'll close out the Rubylith and turn off my mask and simply hit apply again and return back to my original image that was inside of Photoshop. So I could use in raw develop and pull out the noise initially. And it varies also depending on my mood. And I know stylistically, if I wanted to, I could open this up when I open it with Camera Raw and start doing my denoise there. Sometimes I'll do it a little bit before and after. Sometimes the noise is not apparent until I've processed the image. And in that case, I like to do it afterwards. So the nice thing is you have the flexibility based upon the image and your style of editing.
Okay, I think that'll do it for us today. I would thank you very much for a great presentation, and we thank everyone for joining us. Again, please check our website for more information, and we do have more upcoming webinars as well. We hope that you have a great day, and thanks again for joining us.